Hi everyone, it's Nicole. Welcome back to my channel and another paper crafting video tutorial. Today I'm super excited to share a trio of stitched Christmas cards featuring winter floral dies and stencils from Waffle Flower. This is from the August 2024 release, and it is this beautiful set of stencils that can be used with or without the stitching dies. So stitching on your cards is not your jam. You do not have to use that at all. In fact, there is a die that coordinates that you could use instead. You could use this and do layered stenciling, layered die cutting, all of that good stuff. So I love that there are options. I am going to start today and do some stenciling on A2 sized panel. A2 is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. And just to be super extra, we are going to do 3 different color combinations. We are going to start with classic Christmas today, and it's going to be reds and greens with white on craft. I absolutely love red and green on craft for Christmas. It's one of my absolute favorites. Now, full disclosure, I want to tell you guys, I would recommend die cutting your stitching panel first and then stenciling. I did not for all 3. Now, I was able to line it up, but I did want to be absolutely transparent with you guys that I wish I had, because it was slightly tricky to make sure that I had my stitching die lined up in the correct place. And I do think it's fabulous that you're able to choose to use it or not. It makes this winter floral set much more usable. I am using Simon Says Stamp Positively Saturated inks, and I am using some Simon Says Stamp white pigment ink. You will notice that I am using a paper pouncer for that. I feel like you get much better coverage of your white pigment ink with a paper pouncer as opposed to a blending brush. I love these picket fence pouncers, and that is what I am using in my video today. I am also using the deeper, darker reds and greens, more of what I would term the jewel tones from the Positively Saturated ink collection. So things like Cabbage, Artichoke, and Kale for my greens, and Punch and Sangria for my reds. So definitely not the bright primary colors. I want this to be very rich and beautiful, and especially on craft. If you're inking on a colored cardstock, you will often want to choose something that's really going to show up, and I just think the jewel tones look gorgeous. This is a 3-piece stencil. You can see it coming to life. How gorgeous is this? The other thing I would highly recommend, stencil your white first. I didn't, because this was a work in progress, but I do get smarter as we go along. And so I am going in and just adding all of my coloring, and I'm double checking it. That's the beauty of stencils, right? Is that we can check it and then line it back up. I do have to clean my stencils after each use because I do change colors. If you were going to create an entire, you're going to mass produce a bunch of cards, you could do that super easily. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Now, I would probably not stitch mass produce these, but stencil, heck yeah, look how beautiful that is. Okay, we're going to move on to our second color combination. This is what I call my elegant creams and whites. So this is a cream cardstock background, again, 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. And because we can't really do white on the cream and have it show up, I am doing some light taupes. So it's kind of my naturals and greens, very much what I've been into lately. This is actually the color combination or color scheme that I decorate my basement in for the holidays, as well as it is something I'm doing for a current stitch along and cross stitch right now. I am doing neutrals and greens, so kind of been into that lately as well. Super, super pretty. I will come back and add a little more color. Again, the beauty of stencils, when I pull my stencils off, I thought, I don't think I added enough brown. I don't think it's going to show up very beautifully, so we'll add a little bit more. I am trying to keep it to some super light beiges and taupes and not go too much and add too much color. So you'll notice I kind of just went around the edges of the petal, but again, I will come back and add like, I think a little more cappuccino on top. It's either cappuccino or latte. So again, same green tones as the previous card, cabbage, artichoke, and kale. My favorite greens of the moment, for sure. And now we're going to do cappuccino for these petals. And I'm trying to, if you'll notice, instead of really stenciling the open area, which I am, but I'm going around that outer edge to get the shape of the petal without overly going too heavy-handed with my inking. So let's go ahead and do our third stencil for this one. This is going to be some more either latte or cappuccino, and then the kale color of ink for the dark green. For the stitching die, when we line this up, the stitching is on the larger petal. So 8 petals in the center, and then the 4 kind of leafy branches, the ones I'm going to ink right now. This is where the stitching is for this. I was able to stitch all of mine in about 40 minutes. I am going to stitch a few of the petals and one of the leaves on camera, but then I'm going to stitch the rest of them off camera, just literally to save some time. But I wanted to show you exactly how I stitch those, so I will show that here in a minute. It is cappuccino, and you'll notice I'm kind of just going in the center and doing a little bit darker, and then I'm going around the edge of each petal, like or on one side, basically, just to kind of deepen and darken that. And I like that. I think that's pretty. Okay, we have 2 backgrounds down, 1 more to go, and of course, you guys know me. Before we get to the stitching, I'm going to have to add some text over the background. This time, I wanted to do Winter Blues. This is called Winter Floral. I thought this would be so beautiful in blues, and I was right. I love how it turned out. This is some Arctic Hero Arts cardstock. I am using white pigment ink. It's going to be very subtle. It's not going to show up like it did on the craft, but it does show up enough. We are going to even do a little white text over this. The goal is not to have any of those things necessarily be the prominent, like in your face, but rather to just kind of be the supporting cast, if you will. I'm doing a little Earl Grey for some of the leaves on this. Now, for this background, I did not want to use greens. I wanted this to be more of my blue and silver and white color combo, so there won't be any green on this background. So pretty. Okay, once we have all of our backgrounds done, I went to my stash of background stamps, and I actually pulled a background. This one's from Hero Arts, and it's called the NOEL bold print, and it's going to be lyrics, I believe, and it's a beautiful script. The goal, again, is not to read the text. It's just to have that subtle text in the background. And I love picking a Christmassy theme text background if I have one, but again, it isn't necessary. Anything really will work here. Like the old letter from Simon Says Stamp is some beautiful text. There's also like a positive, I think it's called Positive Script from Hero Arts, which is a nice script that would work. But I am using white pigment ink on my blue background and my craft background. So my kind of classic and then my winter blues. And then on our neutral background, white is not going to show up. So I chose to use latte, and I am stitching the light latte ink. And again, I'm just making sure there's full coverage, but it doesn't need to be bold. I didn't want to use a dark brown here. I just need it to be very, very light and subtle. Okay, our background stamping is done. I am going to tape the Winter Floral stitching die in place and run it through my die cutting machine, die cutting the holes that we're going to use to stitch. You'll notice I temporarily taped it down with some little low tack Post-it tape. Let's peel it away. Oh, perfect. But again, see how it would have been easier if I had die cut that first. So here you'll see that I am lining up that outermost stitching hole. You can kind of see the color of your stenciling. Make sure you clean out your die. The tool-in-one does work great for that. I can see the color of my stenciling, and that is how I'm lining it up. That's really what gives me the guideline for where this is going to go. Highly recommend taping it in place. You do not want this shifting after you've done all of that beautiful stenciling. Okay, here is our stitched backgrounds all ready to be stitched up. Now, I was going to do my go-to 3 strands of floss, but I'm going to tell you guys, I decided that did not fill the holes at all. We're going to go ahead and do all 6 strands of floss for stitching on these cards. Now, you can definitely use regular DMC embroidery floss or whatever embroidery floss you like here. I am using this specialty overdyed floss. I have an abundance of this in my stash that really needs to be used. That does me no good in a drawer. So that is what I picked. And I literally just picked whatever I had that matched my colors and went for it. No real thought. So what I'm doing is I am stitching each of these petals. You'll notice I'm going from the outermost holes and coming into the center on the petals. Like I start in the center, but then I bring it towards the center for each. So let's do a couple more of these. And you'll see always coming back to the center. This gives you beautiful, beautiful finished look. I'll do a couple more of these and then I am going to stitch one of the leaves. And again, I'm going to use 6 strands of the floss from the skein for each of those leaves. I will say the green I picked does not stand out against my green inking that much. I'm actually okay with that. I like the texture and whatnot. The stitching on the blue card, which you'll see here in a minute when I show you the finished cards, does stand out a little bit more. I picked a very soft kind of lightish gray for the gray stenciled leaves, and then like a really pretty light blue for the rest of it. Again, just really picking colors that match. The green I'm using is used on both the neutral background and the classic. And then I did a red, of course, for my red petals, and then this neutral brown for the brown petals. So let's go ahead and thread up our green and do one of those leaves really quick and stitch that up. I am holding the end of my floss on the back. I do not knot it. I always think it might come through the front and tear a huge hole. So I'm holding it. And my goal is when I stitch all the way like up every other stitch and then work my way back so that I end where I started and I can just tie a little knot on the back of the panel. And I have a little knot here on the front of my panel where my thread knotted up. So let me work that out and I'll show you that here in a minute. You may have noticed me knotting my thread on the back before. This is stitching on paper. I do not worry too much. For anyone who is a stitcher like I am on, linen or Aida or whatever, cross stitcher, and we often try to make our backs of our projects look really nice. I do not worry about that here. I do not worry about that here whatsoever. I do not care. It's going to be glued down to a card front. And so that is, I just kind of let that all fly right on out the window and I do what I want. I do what I want on this. So we are working our way back. And we are, again, going to just tie this one off. I guess I stitched 2 of these on camera, which is good, I think. Now, like I said, I will go stitch all the rest of these. I actually went and sat in a comfy chair, watched a little TV while I stitched these up, which is what I would recommend as well. I kind of would do this in phases where you could, do all your stenciling, die cutting, blah, blah, blah. and then stitching. Look at these, you guys. Oh my gosh. I will say, I thought this was going to take way longer than it did. It did not, and I love it. Okay, this is the new Holiday Cheer stamp set and coordinating dies from Waffle Flower. I do not want to cover up much of the design, but I definitely want to embellish it, you guys. We don't want to have just a plain card. So I did pick sentiments that are going to kind of go through the center of my winter floral, but not take away from that overall finished look. Because all three cards are different, I am going to stamp and emboss in different colors for each. Using the same tone on tone, we've got our Nina Desert Storm. I am going to stamp with clear embossing ink and heat emboss with white embossing powder for this one. And I do want to make sure I get the best impression. I did use my Misty. I guess I didn't get that all inked up very well, it looks like. And then we're going to sprinkle on white embossing powder and heat set it. I did use a powder tool. I want this to be as clean and neat as possible. And then we're going to grab our heat tool. I would recommend letting your heat tool warm up a few seconds before you take it to your cardstock to help keep your cardstock from, you know, curling up. You can see it even trying to curl up right there. And then we're going to do the same thing for the remaining two sentiments. So these are a little bit smaller. We have Merriest Christmas, Merry Christmas, and Season's Greetings. I completely picked my sentiments because everything in this stamp set's beautiful based on what was small-ish that would fit in the center of my design. So this one, I'm using that same cream cardstock. We are going to prep our cardstock with the powder tool, stamp with the clear embossing ink, but this time we are heat embossing with antique gold. I think the gold is going to look lovely against those neutrals and greens. And finally, we are going to stamp Season's Greetings on the Arctic blue cardstock from Hero Arts and heat emboss that with silver. So it's a little bit extra work to switch your embossing powder colors and switch your greetings. If you are mass producing and doing multiples of these all in the same colorway, you could just easily keep going and keep stamping and do this much, much quicker. Again, I really wanted to show three completely different colorways to show how beautiful this winter floral looks, kind of based on whatever you would want to do here. So again, this is the Season's Greetings, and I want to go silver. Now, that being said, I am a huge fan of the July 2024 release Poinsettia Cluster Dies. It's this poinsettia, which, funny enough, I have yet to use. But the greenery from this set and the little berry branch and pine cones are my favorite things. They work on everything. So I am going to be die cutting a whole bunch, like a little green branch. We're going to die cut a metallic-y branch and some pine cones, and we're going to tuck it around our sentiments for our cards. I do want to mention Waffle Flower does not tab their dies. That means you have nothing you have to cut apart. Absolutely amazing. Highly, highly recommend and love. Can we just get a 2 thumbs up for the fact that we don't have to cut apart our dies? It's my favorite thing. I know that is such a crazy, funny thing, but I just really love it. So you can see how easy it is. I'm just grabbing the die and running it through. What a time saver too, not to have to cut apart dies, right? And I'm laying them on my cards. I will say at this point, I wasn't completely set on using that poinsettia cluster I was just telling you about. So I pop all of these up, but luckily I didn't push them down too terrible hard because I need to pull them up just a little bit to tuck some greenery. Now you might be thinking, but you're covering up some of the stitching. Yes, I am, but I don't think it is enough to take away from that overall finished design, which when I looked at it, I really felt it needed something. You guys know me. I'm a little extra. We've got that text in the background. I stitched on these cards. You know, all of that good stuff. Yes, I think it needs that texture. To me, just elevates the finished design. So we're going to, I will die cut all of the pieces off camera, but then I'm going to bring them in and show you how we're going to embellish. So you can kind of see these here. I've got them laid out. Each of them might feature some different colors in some way or another. Neutral background and classic are going to be the closest or the most similar, I guess I should say, to each other, with the difference being the berry color. On the classic, they're going to be red, but on this one, they're going to be a white glitter, because I just didn't feel like red would work on this. That would just be so distracting. So they're kind of tucked underneath the popped up greeting. We have 2 branches, a berry branch, and a pine cone. And then to elevate it even more, we're going to put a trio of gems on each. We're not going to go over the top. I'm just going to do a trio. These are some peach gems from Spellbinders. But then we're going to take some opaque white grit paste and we're going to brush it on the greenery and the pine cone, because it just makes it just makes it perfection. You want to use the tiniest bit on the tip of your palette knife, and you can see I'm just scraping it on basically, and it doesn't have to be super tidy. I want it to look flocked, and that is what we're doing here. And the difference between flocked and not flocked, oh, I love it so much. Oh, it looks good. And I'm scraping it on. It's going to dry real fast because it's a very, very thin layer. So we are going to do the same thing for our remaining 2 cards. For the blue background, this one definitely has much different, because I want the feel to be different. Now the berry branch is brown cardstock, but it's tucked into a silver matte branch and a white glitter branch. After I tuck the images underneath my popped up greeting, I do put a little liquid glue and then use my tweezers to help hold it in place. The berries on this one are going to be a silver luxe glitter from Simon Says Stamp, but I did keep the browns, and I'm tucking my pine cone into the branches. So we have it kind of a little above the greeting and a little below. But the brown in this case, it flows and works perfectly with this. But we've kept all of our other colors very similar to what you see in the rest of the card. And again, just adding some flocking. I added it this time. Obviously the white glitter branch doesn't need it, but the pine cone, the brown, and even a little bit on the silver matte. We're going to add our final little bit so you can see how I tuck all of these in. Just building our floral arrangement. Who knew we were going to do floral arranging and card making, right? And after I like it, I do add some glue on the back. And then you could put something heavy on top. I use my tweezers, but you could also put like a couple of acrylic blocks or something on top to kind of help hold that down and flat while the glue dries. And here are our classic red berries with our kind of classic color combination. Same thing, we're going to take just the tip of our palette knife and brush on a little bit of that flocking. Now I will add some gems to these final 2 cards. I think I just did like some crystal gems maybe. No, that's not true. I think I did peridot on the classic and then I did the crystal mix on the blue. So a different gem mix for each card. Then I'm going to glue these panels directly to a card base to finish. And here are the finished card designs. Thank you so much for joining me today for this trio of 3 winter floral stitching cards featuring waffle flower, stencils, stamps, and dies. The supplies I used to create my cards are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Thank you guys so much for joining me today, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for joining me today for another paper crafting tutorial. I love being able to share with this incredible community of crafters. I want to give a huge shout out and special thank you to my amazing Patreon members. If you're interested in joining Patreon, please click the link in the description underneath the video here on YouTube. Patreon is a private community where you can support more of what I do. There is exclusive content, information, and behind-the-scenes content. Top-tier members will receive a handmade birthday card during your birthday month, access to D-Stash, and monthly exclusive lives, plus so much more. We would love to have you join our growing community. Please be sure to subscribe to my channel, click that like button, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to always be notified when I have a new video. Thanks for watching!